So, how can I convince somebody that it is good for me to get an education or to do any other challenging thing in my life that we know that there is a correlation between what you actually do and what you get out, but that correlation only happens in a very long term? And this is a really, really challenging thing that, represents a sort of large class, I guess, of problems that you face as innovators. Um, that, or, PhDs or whatever, right? I was thinking about how do I convince the sort of essential problem I was thinking about was how do I convince my in-laws that going back to school or getting an education is actually a good thing, right? I'm not talking specifically about my in-laws, but um, and the truth is you can't. You cannot convince anybody that you are doing something that is positive, that has a good intention. There's there's nothing that you could sort of say that will convince them of that. And that's where you need to think about how do I do this? And how you do it is you just put your blinders on, you take those steps forward no matter what is going on. Now, that's easier said than done, um, because lots of people will only pay attention to the negative. Uh, and it's really, really easy to do that. And I get that on on the Reciprocity Project all the time. People pay attention to the negative clips. That's the stuff that almost always goes viral. There's something that is negative or sensational. But if I was to focus on the more positive things and I say, hey, you know what, this stuff takes time, it's a lot of work, it requires you to take one step after another. Nobody pays attention to that. And that is like such a challenging thing that you face. And this is human nature, right? As somebody that focuses on, studying this stuff, I can't help but sort of say, oh my gosh, this is like so true. It rings so true. So you cannot convince other people that what you're doing is a positive thing. And the only thing that you could do is take that step forward, get up one more day, put in the effort, and then you go to sleep. Right? That's the sort of gist of what I almost always say. It's that effort of putting in the time, and it seems so ridiculous when you put it in that everybody else thinks that you're crazy or that you are, that it's just not working out for you. Any number of different things because they only see the negative. They never see what is the story being told, what is actually going on behind the scenes, because all of that stuff is really boring. That's the mundane, that's the ordinary, that's the thing that everybody sort of sees on a day-to-day basis. So it's not really eye-catching. And I get this all the time. Um, I completely understand. It is very difficult. So, how do I convince? I honestly don't try to convince. I've never had very much success with it. I've had success of getting up and doing it again, getting up and doing it again, and repeatedly doing that regardless of what is going on. And it always feels weird. It never feels like it, people just don't see it. And it's when it happens, right? So if you're doing something that is good for you, people will not see it in the moment, but over the course of a year, they'll ask, like, how do you get there? And it seems like magic. It seems like this is extraordinary. It seems like they just can't sort of see it. And it's super challenging for almost all of us to see what is going on. And it requires you to really tap into some sort of dark moments to address some of these things that are very challenging in your life that um, that you don't want to address, that you don't want to go to, but you address it inside internally of like, man, you know, I really wish that I can say and have this conversation, but I can't. So I need to address it inside of my head. How am I going to reconcile this? What am I going to do? And if you're going to make progress, if you're going to do something that is challenging, you need to come to terms in your head of like, I can't resolve that, but I know that this is good. And I know that this is important. And um, it requires this sort of weird negotiation that you have in your head of, I know that this is actually a good thing for me, and that is going to be helpful. Now, can you mitigate the sort of extreme versions of that? Yeah, absolutely you can. You can mitigate the extreme versions of it, um, and and sort of minimize some of the impact. But just keep in mind every time that you do something like that, the message, what you're doing, is not quite head on. It's going to be a lot more to address it, and it's going to be much more challenging to take those steps forward. You're sort of moderating, what's called moderating. You're kind of lessening the impact of you actually getting to where you need to get to because you're not addressing it head on. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about things like thinking about for education, instead of like, hey, dropping your job and getting an education, you do night courses. Um, you do things like that or there is, a more challenging problem that you can face head on, um, and you kind of tippy toe around it, and you don't face that particular problem a little bit head on. So, you know, when you do those things, it moderates both reactions, and that's kind of the challenging part is that your outcome is going to take longer to get to, and then the audience is not necessarily going to be as receptive, I guess, to what you're actually doing, or astute to what you're doing. So all I can say is if you're doing something that's good, continue to do it. um, it's hard. It's never going to get easier. And you can't convince anybody that what you're doing is good. The only thing you could do is just show and repeat and show and repeat and show until somebody gets it. And often they're not going to get it. There's not going to be like, hey, this is a moment where things change. It's just you got to keep showing up and letting everything else sort of settle around you until I don't know, until you actually figure it out, or something that you hope happened, until life passes, like you just keep doing it, and you know that it's good inside. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.